After 37 years in power, demanding nothing less than absolute loyalty, Robert Mugabe's reign was never going to end at the ballot box. But few could have imagined those 2 weeks in November 2017 when his military moved against him and his people took to the streets.
So what did those crowds mean to former President Mugabe? What did he say?
You saw that they spoke. You saw that they spoke.
Did it break him?
It moved him. It moved him in this sense that he realized they are speaking to say, this is enough.
In negotiations, the generals would salute the man they were looking to overthrow. Still, the coup and his resignation was a humiliating exit for Mugabe, whose very name came to define Zimbabwe.
This is a man who had so much to offer to Zimbabweans, but he didn't. He focused on himself. What a tragedy. The death of Robert Mugabe breaks my heart within the context of the millions of lives that he destroyed, the millions of lives that he wrecked.
Robert Mugabe's legacy was built by violence and oppression, and an economic collapse so bad, money became worthless and millions fled. For many, he left behind a shell of a country.
I, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, do swear.
So it's easy to forget that at first he was likened to Nelson Mandela. Mugabe preached reconciliation after a brutal liberation struggle that he helped lead, repaired bonds with former colonial master Britain. He was even knighted.
The historical links between the United Kingdom and Zimbabwe, which date from far back in history, have grown from strength to strength over the years.
A young Zimbabwe became the envy of the continent. Mugabe, trained as a teacher, presided over an education revolution and a thriving agricultural powerhouse.
Robert Mugabe was my hero, and I looked up to Robert Mugabe's eloquence, Robert Mugabe's confidence in postulating amazing positions. And I decided that this is the man that impressed me.
But Mugabe liked to say he had a degree in violence. And from the start, he squashed dissent.
How?
Yes, I saw people being killed. I saw them killed, and you could not say a word.
Alice Moali relives her trauma every day. Her back was broken by the North Korean-trained 5th Brigade as they swept through Matabeleland in 1983. The operation was called Gukurahundi in Shona, or the rains that wash away the chaff. Meant to crush Mugabe's rivals, civilians were targeted, victims chosen along ethnic lines. When Mugabe's power was again threatened, this time at the ballot, he sanctioned violent attacks, seizing white-owned farms by so-called war veterans, strengthening his hand. And he crushed a rising opposition, using his hold on state security. But the violence shocked the world. Mugabe was abandoned by the West and its aid, and the country never fully recovered.
They want to come to us and dictate to us what we must do. That shall never be. Not in Zimbabwe. Never, never. Whatever the cost.
Robert Mugabe was not an idiot in the country. He worked hard for this country. Mistakes were done, but he's a man who cared. But ultimately, of course, the president is, in the end, wholly responsible for whatever action.
Actions throughout a long rule and rapid demise that many critics say were driven by Mugabe's #1 priority, himself.
Bombastic, blonde, one of Brexit's big backers. Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson is known simply as Boris to the British public. Sometimes called a Marmite politician. You either love him or you hate him. New York born, Eton bred and Oxford educated. A man gaffe-prone and unpredictable enough that the phrase Boris is Boris, accompanied by a shrug, has become an adage in British politics. Born into a political family, Eurosceptic Johnson spent some of his childhood in Brussels, where he'd later work as a journalist, making a career out of criticising EU rules and regulations. He got fired from a British newspaper for fabricating a quote But in typical Boris style, he landed on his feet and became editor of The Spectator magazine, and then a member of Parliament, making a name for himself as a charismatic maverick in the British media. In a political triumph, he was elected London Mayor in 2008, made headlines during the 2012 London Olympics for championing the City of London and getting stuck on a zip wire. Boris Johnson has been referred to as the closest thing Britain has to President Trump because of his populist tone, controversial anti-immigrant rhetoric, likening Muslim women wearing the burqa to letterboxes, and cultural faux pas as Foreign Secretary, including reciting colonial-era poems on trips to territories of the former British Empire. Donald Trump has called him a friend and supported his run for Prime Minister.
Boris Johnson, I think, would be a great Prime Minister.
Not short of ambition, Johnson's sister recalled how as a child he wanted to be world king. He steeped himself in the ancient heroes of the past and those closer to home, writing a book on his political inspiration, Winston Churchill. His ambition for the top job in Westminster has been the worst kept secret in British politics. After a rocky leadership campaign marred by chaos in his personal life and accusations of avoiding proper media scrutiny, Boris Johnson beat his rival Jeremy Hunt to replace Theresa May. It will face the same problems as May did: a hung parliament, Brexit deadlock, and a divided country and party. His supporters hope by sheer force of personality and a tougher negotiating stance with the EU that he will succeed where others have failed.